the 4th day of January 2022. Bet everybody thought I was going to say 2021 because that's normally what I do at the beginning of each year. I'll forget it's the new year. The EU is claiming that nuclear is green. My goodness, hard cases. We're going to talk about that. I hope everybody's doing good. This is also a fundraiser to kick off the new year. We are in the fight of our lives, and we're just going to dive right into the show. There's 2 links at the bottom of the description you can donate. That's the only 2 ways you can donate. And nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. That one's in France. And so that's not green. And even like new power plants, this one's United Kingdom size, will be surrounded by farms. And the problem with it is that it's constant radiation fallout from nuclear power plants that actually spread all the way around the planet. It's a non-stop plume coming from the fuel pools. So when you take the fuel out of the reactor core, let's go backwards. So when you put a reactor core and you start it up in a nuclear chain reaction, it produces energy by the fuel starts splitting the atom, but you can never turn that off. That's forever and ever and ever for millions of years down the road. And so when they talk about you have no solution for waste, they forget to tell you what the actual issue is with the waste. In fact, you'll never, ever hear anybody on the entire planet talk about that facet. This is the only spot on the planet where you'll actually hear them acknowledging. And so the radioactive fallout from the fuel is just, it's an absurd amount of radiation. So when you think about all the fuel pools, there's over 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Let's jump right into it. We'll get into that coming up also. France is now going to take over the EU presidency, which is making a decision on whether nuclear is green or not. So they delayed it for a whole year, coming out with a verdict on whether nuclear was green, because France wanted to be able to be the one in positions of authority, and they're ruthless. They're ruthless. If you look at what they've done to the French Polynesians, they raided every single person, and in Algeria, and the Pacific Ocean, of course. So you'll hear, I'm going to show you some studies coming up, you'll hear them talking about cesium, but there's actually 1,000 different fission products you need to worry about. And then let's talk about the cover-up of nuclear. So enormous amount of plutonium. And the building, each building had because of the fuel pools, and that's part of the chain reaction, is it converts uranium-238 into plutonium-238. It's around 25,000 pounds of plutonium is now released into the environment. This is absurd, horrific amount. So, according to the nuclear engineer, on April the 13th, the buildings were destroyed. There was no fuel pool at reactor 4. And the fuel pool, just to get you up to speed on that, are these depictions there. There's another one you can see over there. This is the reactor core here. These were 190-foot buildings. And you can see the guts are hanging out of the buildings. There is no integrity to the building. So I just want to play some clips of different medias trying to convince you that they're in a fuel pool that doesn't even exist. I know, you're like, no, Dana, there's no way that they're doing that, but actually, yes, they are.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor into a safer location.
This is Cecilia Vega, and she is currently the White House representative from Australia. Now, she's simply not where she's claiming to be. First off, the building, you can see what's left of it, is not 190 feet tall anymore. I know because everybody you see there is me. And each person you see there, I shot the video, each person is individual. So no two people there, like terracotta soldiers, no two of Dana's there are the same.
So this is really why we've been brought here. Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4.
Now that's Rupert Winfield Hayes. Obviously, he's not at the top of the building. So this is interesting, right? You have ABC and BBC, and you have ABC from Australia, BBC from United Kingdom, claiming they're on top of a building that don't exist. So the executives, all the producers, everybody had to go in on that. That's an actual deception. It's 100% deception, which and I got to set the stage so you can make up your own minds after. This is CNN journalist claiming she's on top of Reactor 4. That
we are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Now, she's obviously not on top, 190 feet up in the air, of the building to your left. And they sacrificed a lot of homeless, but unfortunately no journalists. Now, is anybody familiar with Helen Caldicott? Helen Caldicott has wrote 14 anti-nuclear books. She's from Australia. She's a physicist, a physician rather, a doctor, a pediatrician. She's also going to pretend that the building looks like this and doesn't look like that, and she's asked about it in an interview, and we'll play a little tiny 40-second clip for you.
Let me ask you this. You've said that if the spent fuel pool in number 4 collapses, that you would evacuate your family from Boston. Do you think we would ever know the truth of what's going on there? And the reason I ask is because we've seen coverage in the national news media here in the United States from ABC News and others that take video cameras in, saying that they're being given exclusive access to number 4 in the removal of the fuel rods, which is said to have begun. And what we see in the video being shared here in America is a pristine interior building. It doesn't look like a building in which the top blew off in a hydrogen explosion.
The Japanese are very tidy people, and they have, by robot control and by human beings, removed the debris from the top of Building 4, and it does look pristine.
And of course, it doesn't work that way, right? You can't just pretend, and that's what they're all doing. So there's Helen Caldicott pretending she's on top of a building, that the building looks like that over there and doesn't look like that. Now, she's wrote 14 books on anti-nuclear, and she's done several hundred radio interviews where she asserted they got the fuel out of the pool. In fact, let me play a clip of her talking about that quickly. And it's not always easy. I'll just try quickly, see if I can find it. There you go. She says they got the fuel out of Reactor 4 fuel pool, but it actually doesn't exist.
Building 4 is also similarly fragile, and it's got a huge cooling pool on top with all its fuel rods, but they have been removing them. And it's been a very delicate procedure, and they've removed almost all. So if that collapsed now, I think it would probably be okay.
Claiming they got the fuel out of a pool when it doesn't exist. And then Arnie Gunnarsson, now he made the assemblies. He's claiming that they went in and put supports under the fuel pool.
The Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
So the fuel pools are the depictions up there at the very top. There's two of them. He's claiming they went in and put structures under the pool. Okay, so we got one more. This is CBS, Seth Dorn. He's an actual senator's son. Let's listen to him tell this story.
A rare look inside the damaged nuclear plant in Fukushima, Japan. Nearly 3 years after the earthquake and tsunami, the plant is still emitting radiation and likely will be for years. Seth Doan went inside to see the painstaking cleanup.
This is what TEPCO wants us to see, the heart of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
A hydrogen explosion tore off the...
So he's claiming he's in a pool at the very top, way 100 feet above, right here is where he's claiming he is. So you've just seen all kinds of worldwide major medias claiming the fuel pool is intact. You've seen Arnie Gunnarsson from Fairwinds and Helen Caldercott with 14 anti-nuclear books published claiming the same thing. So the reason they're doing that is because the radiation from the missing pools has covered the planet and is exterminating the species on the planet. And we've done research expeditions to quantify those assertions year after year after year, from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska, for 4 to 5 months a year on the ocean. And it's an extinction event. And the glaciers are missing also. And the media worldwide has refused to acknowledge that. That was Reactor 3. That is also missing the fuel pools. And you can see here where they claim journalists are on top of our media, aka journalists, are walking around on the number 3 reactor. But this is what it looks like. The fuel pools were completely blasted out to the environment. They use cranes to now you can look in there, you can see it's destroyed, by the way. They put this structure around it. It doesn't physically touch the building because the building, that's all that was left of the building, is a little stub. So there's no fuel poles there. But that didn't stop them from pretending that it was. It's an incredible deception. And how do they walk back this lie? How is that possible now? When all the media worldwide, it wasn't just the ones I showed you, it's all the media worldwide hates our guts and hates all the animals and the birds and the insects with a passion. The radiation fallout, the Norwegian Institute for Air Research had done models based only on venting, not based on the actual meltdowns like I just showed you. So it would be infinitely worse than that, and that's extraordinarily bad, by the way. Unit 2 had completely liquefied, aka chain reaction, and they never seen anything like that in the history. And fatal radiation levels found at Fukushima exceeding 10 sieverts per hour is fatal. That's New York Times. Reactor 1 was 1,000,000 sieverts. So 10 sieverts is considered a fatal dose. Then what is 1,000,000 sieverts? It's a fatal dose from a half a mile away or a mile away. Massive radioactivity releases at Fukushima going on for almost 3 years. Massive releases going on for almost 3 years. Visible steam is just the tip of the iceberg. And so that doesn't really make a lot of sense for the average person. So let me explain that. Workers say the ground under Fukushima is cracking. That's from the China syndrome. And the melted radioactive steam is coming up. This is 40 times normal speed of the steam they're talking about. And let me put this on the big screen because it's hard to comprehend. So you see them talking about 10 sieverts is 6 places where the steam is coming out of the ground. So the whole site is a lethal dose, the entire site. The water is at 2 sieverts per hour, which means the tanks behind them are 1.4 million sieverts per tank, which means if you stand there, that's lethal dose, you die right away. And as I'll show you in a few minutes, the tanks obviously can't be full of that, otherwise you couldn't actually build another tank there and you certainly couldn't walk there. This is how radiation works. So is radiation carbon free, like the EU is now about to assert? Well, here's something that's really frightening, was that the human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. Now, why would you do a study like that? They're acknowledging that worldwide radioactive fallout from weapons testing, which is insignificant compared to Fukushima, by the way. And weapons testing is brutal, don't get me wrong. It's still brutal. But Fukushima is over the top amount of radiation releases. Human sex ratio at birth after atmospheric weapons testing. Human sex ratio works this way. More males than females are being born when you think of, this is what they're talking about. But that has to be true for insects and animals and birds and mammals, not just humans. You can't just affect. And weapons testing radiated every human on the planet and influenced the sex ratio of males and females. Now, gas, oil, and coal emissions don't have those type of attributes, yes? Human sex ratio at birth and residential proximity to nuclear facilities in France. So France has 54 reactors, and studies around the reactors showed more males being born than females being born in a 10 to 20 mile radius. Now, if they go all the way up to 50, you would see the same thing. You would also see incredible heart problems and liver problems and lung problems, etc., etc. It's not just cancer. Trends in birth and a birth sex ratio in the vicinity of research reactors in Germany. Every time we look, and research, and the significance of that is that research reactors are very small reactors compared to a power plant. So if they can cause these incredible discrepancies, then that's a weapon of mass destruction being released into your communities. And most of these reactors are surrounded by farms. And this is a death cult, a genocide. And nobody's having this conversation. It's terrifying. Global implications of Chernobyl. So if you go look at the official story of Chernobyl, they talk about a little tiny exclusion zone. They talk about 28 people that died. What they don't talk about is the fact that there's 600 helicopter pilots that had died, according to Harvard University, all of them within a few weeks, and that they closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and in Scotland and the United Kingdom that are still radioactive today, even though they lift restrictions on most of them. A couple of years ago, they lifted restrictions on freshwater fishing in Switzerland because it's been radiated for over 30 years. And the only reason they've done that is because Fukushima is destroying all the species. Trends in human sex odds at births in Europe after Chernobyl. So what they're saying is that the EU, which is calling nuclear carbon free, their entire EU bloc of countries had sex ratio changed. There's more males than females being born because of Chernobyl in 1986. The effects of the accident at the Chernobyl atomic plant and the outcome of pregnancy. And so I put together these studies to show you it's not just Chernobyl, it affected the entire planet. The potential for disease, by the way, initiations by inhaled beta-emitting nuclear particles. But you should see similar studies for alpha and neutrons, gamma, not just beta. Infant mortality after Chernobyl. And in blue, you'll see all the people in the study, right? Pregnancy outcome in Sweden after Chernobyl. So the reason they're doing this is because they've seen Chernobyl affecting the survival rates of pregnancy, or neonates and infants. Early infant mortalities in West Germany before and after. These academic studies are not because they're bored. It's because Chernobyl had a brutal effect. And Chernobyl is like a paper towel compared to Fukushima, but obviously Chernobyl is brutal. Pregnancy outcome in Norway after Chernobyl. Pregnancy outcome in Finland after Chernobyl. Legally induced abortions in Denmark after Chernobyl. Legal abortions in Sweden after Chernobyl. Birth defects and abortion rates in Austria after Chernobyl. Prenatal mortality in the United Kingdom after Chernobyl. Prenatal loss of 400 male fetuses in the Czech Republic after Chernobyl. Down syndrome clusters in Belarus linked with Chernobyl. Down syndrome in Scotland linked with Chernobyl. Schizophrenia linked with Chernobyl. And the list just goes on and on and on incredibly. Situation in Fukushima is beyond imagination. Many young and old people are dying from heart attacks. Young woman died of leukemia. And so the argument is that nuclear is green and carbon free, and it's now going to go into accordingly what they leaked. We'll cover those stories in a minute because they're important. Elementary school in Japan is using water bottles to shield the students from radiation because the mad nuclear scientists won't let them evacuate. This story is truly horrifying. An elementary school in Koriyama City, located in Fukushima, 34 miles away from Fukushima, is using water bottles to shield radiation from the schoolyard. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside square boxes that are stacked around the classrooms. And that's a picture of it. Here's some more pictures. To shield students from the radiation from outdoors. Obviously, they should be in the school or the city. And it does show you how heartless the nuclear industry actually is. It's using water bottles to shield radiation coming from the courtyards and other areas around the school buildings. The bottles are filled with water and placed inside square boxes. According to the school, it reduced the radiation levels inside by 1/3 inside the classrooms. So I'll show you why they have to do this in a moment. Residents of Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amount of radioactive material which has been found all around their town, Koriyama City. United Nations Scientific Committee on the Effects of Atomic Radiation talking about absorbed doses in red bone marrow in Japan for the first year. Average disposition, which is radioactive fallout, of 137 cesium. Remember, I showed you a headline earlier, just 1,000 fission products you got to worry about. So the second line over there is the becquerels per square meter of just gamma. Not alpha, not beta, not neutron, just, which is outrageous. They only included cesium. It's outrageous that they would only acknowledge that. But Koriyama City, per square meter of just gamma, is 162,000 counts per minute of man-made anthropogenic radiation. This is absurd numbers. You can see surrounding communities. Now, these communities weren't evacuated because otherwise you have to pay them, see? So, elementary school in Japan using water bottles to shield students should have been evacuated. These are absurd numbers. 55 becquerels at a nuclear power plant anywhere else in the world is a no-go zone. And the heartless industry is keeping the children there and then studying them as if they're guinea pigs. Residents of Koriyama City have been concerned about the high amounts of radioactive material because Koriyama City is outside the evacuation zone. The government has barely conducted any decontamination activities and won't let the children evacuate. So 50 becquerels a kilogram in humans lead to irreversible lesions in the vital organ. 50 becquerels a kilogram in your food. So this number here is the becquerels per kilogram per square meter. You can divide it by 64 to get a kilogram. So you can see they're in a radioactive environment, but they're not acknowledging alpha, beta, or neutrons. So in Tokyo, at 18 million becquerels a square meter, is 276,000 becquerels a kilogram, when 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible lesions in the human organs. So obviously Tokyo should be evacuated. And we have overwhelming evidence that most of Japan should be evacuated. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes. By the way, the EU denies everything I showed you exists. Everything. And I hope that shocks you. Because we can't have a future with this bizarre industry. There is no future for any species or humanity with just nuclear power, let alone nuclear weapons. But they're not going to use the nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons is to keep you from thinking about what I'm showing you. Physicians report increased cancers around nuclear site, birth defects, small births, underweight, spontaneous abortions on the rise, staggering numbers of cancer illnesses and birth defects leaked to nuclear waste. Over 700 cases in just 4 square miles. That's down by Hanford. So why would you want to live next door to that creature right there? You know what I mean? The people in the EU who had makes the decisions on nuclear being carbon free, you couldn't drag them there by their hair. They would tear your eyes out of your head screaming. 3 Mile Island report on enormous increases in cancer deaths, infant mortality rates, birds disappeared, mutations were observed. pet deaths after radiation exposure supported by top universities, reanalyst of 3 Mile Island data. University of Pittsburgh radiation expert, child cancer risk doubles if exposed to just a couple of x-rays worth of radiation during pregnancy. So no matter how you look at man-made radiation, it's truly terrifying, yes? 3,000 evacuees rushed to the hospital by ambulances from shelters in Fukushima, Iwate, and Miyagi. These are all no-go lands at this time, right? They evacuated because of the plume. They evacuated late, and they had radiation sickness. The lunatic nuclear industry has, for many years, we've covered it, claiming they died from stress from being evacuated from their homes. Now, we've seen many examples of hurricanes, typhoons, cyclones, where 10 to 15 million people evacuated, and we've never seen numbers like that ever under any circumstances. We've never seen... think this one here. So, nuclear fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home, immediately take off their clothes and cleanse the nuclear contaminants. So let's pretend this was a coal plant broke down. Coal plant fallout will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home, take off their clothes and cleanse. You'll never see a headline like that, right? You won't see a headline like gas plant broke down. Gas plant fallout, carbon will engulf Taiwan. People should stay home, take off their clothes. And by the way, radioactive fallout is forever. It's forever. It's forever and ever and ever. I gotta fix the light on the Geiger counter in a minute. It's not very bright, is it? Tanks at the crippled Fukushima plant leaked highly radioactive water. So 2013 they had 1,000 tanks. In 2014 they had 1,200 tanks. 2017 they had 900 tanks. And by the way, try walking with both of your heels on the ground like that. 2019 they had 1,000 tanks. In 2021 they had 1,000 tanks. So 2021 1,000 tanks. 2000. Hang on. 2000. And I went to another. Bear with me 1 second. The story of my life here. 2021 was 1,000 tanks. 2013 was 1,000 tanks. And so the idea of the tanks is to trick you into thinking that nothing has gone into the ocean. This is the strangest thing imaginable because they only started that narrative around 2016 or 2015. That narrative was created in France during the Paris Accord. It was strictly meant to trick you, and France is really good at that. So France is now taking over the 6-month EU presidency, and they're the ones calling the shots. They're the ones now are going to label nuclear as green. Right? That's what they're up to, and that's why they've done it this way. That's why there's been a delay for the last year. EU draft plan to label gas and nuclear investment as green. Well, France drafted plan to label gas and nuclear investment as green, right? Because France took over. And if you look at France's legacy, it's just, it's a hateful, despicable industry, the nuclear industry. It employs around 2 million people in France, mostly government and family members. And they'll cut everybody's throat on the planet to keep their stupid nuclear for another while. But what they're planning on doing is quite insidious, as you'll see. Steam rises from the cooling towers in Belleville, France. And when you look up that plant, it's surrounded by farms. Yeah? It's completely surrounded by farms. That's a terrifying picture, by the way. There's a list of economic activity and environmental criteria that they must be labeled as green investments by, and I'll get back in the picture, I guess, by restricting the green label to truly climate-friendly projects. The system aims to make those investments more attractive to private capital and stop what they call greenwashing, where they claim something is green, but it's not, but that way they get investors to spend money on it, which is exactly what they got done. Where companies or investors overstate their eco-friendly credentials, and it's absurd to suggest that nuclear has any kind of green attributes. It's completely absurd. All nuclear power plants need 2 external coal plants, oil, gas plants to run. It's usually coal because coal is cheaper. They needed to build it, they needed to run it for its lifetime, then they needed for 60 to 100 years to decommission it, dedicated to that site only. And a draft of a commission proposal seen by crazy lunatic writers would label nuclear power plant investments as green if the project has a plan, funds, and a site to safely dispose of radioactive waste to be deemed green. New nuclear plants must receive construction permits before 2045, before 23 years down the road. So as long as they get a permit by 2045, they're considered green. This is absurdness. This is the ultimate in absurdness, by the way. Last year, there was 333 nuclear power plants where the renewables came online this year, 2021. That's 290 gigawatts. You can't build 333 nuclear power plants in 12 months. Even if the whole planet tried, you still couldn't pull it off, right? So obviously it doesn't have green. So 2045, it takes from 10 to 15 years to build a plant, which is 2055. This is the opposite of what we're trying to do. Now, the reason that this planet climate change is caused by radioactive fallout in the first place. So you can't fix radioactive fallout by creating more radioactive fallout. That is a model of the Fukushima radioactive fallout in the first 20 days. If you let the model run for another 10 days, it covers the rest of the planet, see? The model, by the way, is only based on venting. It's not based upon the actual emissions on top of that. New nuclear plants must receive construction permits before 2045. This is absurd. So the EU taxonomy is not, it doesn't have any credentials whatsoever. It's completely credential-less. It's a mockery. Its whole purpose, obviously, is to hoodwink the entire planet so that a group of people can get a paycheck. Murder every species and everybody on the planet so they can get a paycheck. It's unconscionable and it's untenable to do what they're doing. It's completely defies reality that they're doing what they're doing. Just give me a second, I gotta fix that light on the Geiger counter. Hopefully that's a bit better. I'll figure it out for next time. Well, they're going to destroy the planet. Hi, everybody. This is the first show of the year, so we're having a fundraiser. There's 2 links in the bottom of the description. And that's the only 2 ways you can donate to me. And it's been a dismal last year. At the end of the year, it was okay. I mean, I've had bad years before. It's not the first bad year I've had. Many years we went flat broke and couldn't fund the operation. See, the big problem is there's no one to replace us, right? And so I don't have a right to slow down or stop. And quite frankly, the last 4 days, I'm asleep this time each day. This is, I've slept almost all day, every day. I wake up, I do work like this, and then I sleep again. It does show you how worn out I actually am. I'm in the woods on quad looking for tracks each day. We're in today minus 13. Right now it's minus 20. Ooh, I'm still cold from the day, by the way. 4 hours and couldn't even feel my fingers when I got home. The door handle was frozen. It's like, oh my God, I'm not going to get back in my house. I'm going to die right in front of my door. And so I had tea in the thermos left over and put it on the key and stuck it in the lock and it worked. I almost just left the quad outdoors in the snowstorm. And plan to switch to low carbon gases by the end of 2020-35. This is a scam to make you think that nuclear is the solution when nuclear is actually the problem. Nuclear power generation will be labeled green on the grounds they have transitional activities, defined as those that are not fully sustainable, which have emissions below industry average and do not lock in polluting assets. But this nuclear is dirty. It's simply dirty, every facet, from beginning to end. The whole running process is incredibly dirty. It boils 1 million gallons per minute. So typically, a glass of salt water would have 1 billion creatures in it. 1 billion creatures in a glass of salt water. So think of 16 billion times 1 million every minute of creatures being boiled alive. And that's incredible carbon intensive. And then the water vapors you're releasing creates clouds, incredibly carbon intensive again. The whole process is run by power plants, external power plants. Taking account of scientific advice, current technology progress, as well as varying transitional challenges across member states, the Commission considers, they didn't consider anything. It's total hogwash. There's a role for natural gas and nuclear as a means to facilitate the transition. Like I don't care if you use coal or gas or oil. I don't give a frig if you burn mummies. Anything but nuclear. Nuclear has no right to exist on the planet. It has no right to exist. It's not carbon free. It's the most carbon intensive thing on the planet. And every facet of it is insidiously evil. It's monstrously, hideously, odiously evil. When you look at the emissions just from Fukushima, covering the whole planet with Neptunium, they're TEPCO's official numbers turn into a model. EU countries, well, this organization known as the EU, it's an incredible takeover of sovereignty of each of the countries that ended up in this bloc. Obviously, this was created by United Nations, which is 195 militaries. They're not united. They're not nations. They're the military-industrial complex. They're the world's biggest bully. EU, and they were created in the ashes of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, for goodness sakes. EU countries and a panel of experts will scrutinize the draft report proposals, which could change before it is due to be published later in January. And once published, it could be vetoed by a majority of EU countries or the European Parliament. The only way humans have a future is if we get rid of nuclear as quick as we can. Even if we all got to do without lights, it's better to have no lights. It's better to have no power anywhere on the planet than it is to have a single nuclear power plant or its fuel pools hemorrhaging into the environment 24/7. Like, carbon capture should be radioactive fallout capture. Plants can't live without carbon. We can't live. Animals, insects, birds, mammals, animals can't survive without carbon. Carbon is not the issue. Carbon doesn't pulse energy every second for billions of years. That's what nuclear does. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes covering the planet, for starters. And gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy every second, heating up the planet. That's an invisible snowstorm. That's just only a 20-day model. If you let the model run for 10 more days, you'll see an invisible snowstorm circling the entire planet, pulsing energy at 186,000 miles per second, heating up the planet forever. It's been going on for 75 years. The only thing that does that is nuclear. The policy has been mired in lobbying from governments for more than a year. No, what was going on is they wanted the EU to be run by France. That's why they put off making the decision. So France would be in position of authority, and France, we know, France will screw you and everybody in your country on the drop of a hat. They're, like the French, I love the French people. I hate the French bureaucrats in the nuclear industry. They're very, 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 very. They're worse than Iran. They're worse than North Korea. See, North Korea and Iran are the boogeyman when they're not even the boogeyman. France is the boogeyman, though. The policy has been mired in lobbying. So again, they're talking about methane. They put potent planet-warming gas. No, methane doesn't do this. Methane is part of the natural cycle on the planet. It's going on 1 billion years before we even showed up. Radioactive fallout is 100% man-made. These elements are not from the solar system. The sun doesn't create these elements. We got a poll tonight, by the way. A poll. Is nuclear power carbon-free? We got 31 votes. And 97% acknowledge that nuclear is not carbon-free. We got 24 people on our show, 22 likes. I've only been doing this for a decade. And so the idea is they have lobbyists at Google have control over these numbers, right? I was out looking for spiders last summer, camping, doing a spider count, bird count, insect counts, but mostly spiders in particular. They disappeared. And spiders will bioaccumulate radiation 1,000% more than the surrounding background radiation because they're eating all the insects that bioaccumulated. And it's an extinction event. We've been documenting it now for a decade. Fukushima radioactive fallout is an extinction event. Deep emission cuts, scientists say, are needed to avoid disasters. Well, first off, when you talk about scientists, these are the same scientists who refused to call out the fake Reactor 4 pictures and videos I showed you earlier at the very beginning of the show. Fukushima fallout is global warming. Nuclear power produces very low CO2 emissions. Of course, this is simply not true. Nuclear power plants, they're fuel pools. They have 2 on each building. They're hemorrhaging radiation because they're splitting the atoms. They keep them in pools. They're boiling off the pool each day. The pools have to be refilled each day. The boiled water is trillions of atoms per liter, is emitted up the tall skinny stacks, and then that evaporates and liberates the isotopes into the environment. They float around the plant looking for victims to infest. It's absurd. I got no idea how it lasts this long outside of, the nuclear industry's captured your medias, completely, by the way. They captured your universities, and I mean completely, and they captured the key positions throughout your governments in increments over 75 years. They're a infestation on our planet. They're a parasite, and we are the host. So this is another model of the radioactive fallout. This is xenon-133. Burns a hole through your lung and sequesters in your bones where it gets in your pelvis. It starts mutating your stem cells. Some environmental campaigners and green EU lawmakers criticized. They should vehemently protest it, shouldn't they? Because it got leaked, they said, the leaked proposal. So what we're covering tonight is not the official narrative, it's the leak. And it was leaked on purpose to Reuters and Associated Press, who has around 1,600 medias each that aggregate the stories they put up with spider bots, with interweb spider bots. It's all done automatically. And so one story with the same picture, the same narrative, the same authors instantly circulates around the planet in about 60 seconds. Proposal on gas and nuclear. Austria opposes nuclear power alongside countries including Germany. Luxembourg allows you to sue a nuclear power plant 30 years after an accident. EU states include the Czech Republic, Finland, France, which gets 70% of its power from fuel from a impoverished country in Niger. France had caused a civil war for the last 60 plus years in Niger. They destroyed millions and millions of people's livelihoods and lives and communities, the borders of the country, caused an endless war in the country so France can get its cheap uranium. Like, there's evil and then there's France. Or there's France and then there's evil. Talking about CO2 emitting coal fuel. Again, because they can't compete with coal, right? If you don't put your coal plant in the community, then there's no issues. The coal doesn't heat up the planet. It's absurd to suggest that coal, oil, and gas heats up the planet. That's the kookiest thing imaginable. Because coal, oil, and gas doesn't pulse energy every second. This is a 19-day model of the Fukushima radioactive fallout based solely on venting, not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns I had showed you earlier. Brussels unveils plan for green gas and nuclear label. European Commission unveiled on Friday night a draft green label for nuclear, which aims to facilitate the financing of nuclear to combat climate change. Again, this is absurdness. Climate change, gas, oil, and coal doesn't cover the entire planet and the oceans with radiation that pulses energy every second at the speed of light, 186 miles per second. 186 miles per hour speed every second. That's the speed of light. That's what this radiation does, and it does it every second for millions of years. The fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation worldwide. So even if you shut off all nuclear power plants worldwide, all the fuel pools are going to, and never had anything else on the planet, we shut down all power supplies, all industries, all factories. If you got rid of every human on the planet, and the only thing left was the fuel pools, and all the species, which are almost wiped out now, by the way, on the way to being wiped out because of radiation fallout has broken the food chain, that the fuel pools emissions will eventually exterminate all the species on the planet. This is why no repository exists anywhere on the planet, that they want the planet exterminated, and while they're doing it, they're going to blame it on you. So they keep the propaganda and the lie alive. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. France, which wants to revive its nuclear, well, why didn't it start 20 years ago? Why didn't it start 15 years ago? Why didn't it start 10 years ago? Why didn't it start 5 years ago? Why didn't it start 2 years ago? Why did it wait until today? If that's true, then. It's an insidious, hateful industry, and they should all be locked up for the rest of their natural lives, and their children should be taken and sent to Fukushima. Revive a small group of countries led by Germany have fought to exclude the atom. Because Germany understands that nuclear is evil, but they won't acknowledge why it's evil. They just say it's evil or dangerous. And the best thing that they can do, if they want to win this argument, they got to come out with why nuclear is bad. They can't just say, well, nuclear is dangerous. You got to say, well, Fukushima, they're faking reactor 4 and they faked reactor 3. They're not actually in the fuel pools. That's the end of nuclear right there. To come out and talk about how the fuel pools are still splitting the atoms, and those atoms are released into the environment, circling the planet. And not only that, how each nuclear reactor is surrounded by farms, so they can poison you no matter where you to. All of these meets the definition of crimes, by the way, and definitely meets the definition of evil. There is nothing in history compared to the evilness of the nuclear industry. You take all of Pol Pot and Mao and Hitler and the rest of them, they don't scratch the surface of what nuclear has been up to. It has to go. It has no right to exist. And if it doesn't want to go politely, then we should remove it violently. Violently being we accost it, we arrest them, we incarcerate them for crimes against humanity and omnicide. Because what they're doing to you is very violent. What they're doing to all the species is monstrous. It's the equivalent of monsters. Both the pro-gas, pro-nuclear groups agree that renewable energies, wind, solar, what about tide? What about geothermal? Are already labeled by the Commission suffer for intermittent productions. Well, they don't have a problem with intermittent productions. You refuse to acknowledge that you can store energy with compressed air storage anywhere on the planet. You dig mine shafts and you compress your air down there. Many companies have done it. And you can pump hydro. There's a half a million places natural on the planet. So it's easy, incredibly easy to store electricity. And if they start doing that and people wake up to it, then they're going to demand it everywhere else, right? No, they're doing everything they can to destroy the future of all species. They're absolutely unequivocally exterminating our planet. And why are we sitting in silence? Haunts me every night. Guarantees regarding waste treatment. There's not waste treatment. The waste is splitting the atom, releasing it into the environment in absurd amounts every moment. It's absurd amounts we're talking about. And the dismantling of nuclear installations at the end of their life are also required. It's heartbreaking. We don't deserve to be exterminated by this death cult, this secret society of morons. These are morons. These are unequivocal morons. These are gobblish morons, these people in this industry. Your plans to say nuclear power and natural gas. And of course, I'd rather have natural gas, oil, and coal anywhere than nuclear. Look, I'm not at this because I'm bored. I'm at this because we're desperate to save the future for the rest of the people and the species that might be able to survive what's already happened. It's highly unlikely the species are going to survive because we've broken the food chain in so many ways with Fukushima radioactive fallout. Because the radioactive fallout has destroyed the insect population, the bird population, the animal population, the mammal population. In fact, the radiation has destroyed the bacteria in most of the forest. This is why we're having brutal forest fires. The draft proposal could help unleash a wave of investments, critics say. Both sources of energy causes damage to the environment. The only one we're worried about is nuclear. Nuclear has to go, and it has to go now, and it has to be dealt with appropriately, not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're putting the final nail in the coffin of 8 million species. Any final plan would be subject to approval by the majority of the member states or by the European Parliament, who are appointed, not elected. Right? This year it's going to be France for the next 6 months. It's not really a parliament. It's absurd that this exists in the first place. It follows months of intense lobbying, pitting a pro-nuclear bloc led by useful idiot Macron of France. Nuclear power would be considered a sustainable investment if countries can safely dispose of nuclear waste. No, nuclear power can be considered an investment if you can undo this. This is France's model of the radioactive fallout, for goodness sakes. It covers the entire planet. The entire planet. In radioactive fallout. This is the Pacific Ocean. This is the Atlantic Ocean. This is Europe. Europe is completely irradiated along with everybody else. So how can they ignore that? How can France ignore their own models, which are not even close to being accurate because they don't include the actual inventories, the real inventories, the actual true numbers, the actual meltdowns, for goodness sakes. Hard cases. Others say neither deserve to be considered a green investment. Like, I don't care about gas, but nuclear has no right to exist. And anybody who advocates nuclear without understanding the big picture is not being honest. And let me give you that explanation again. Hang on. So the fuel pools at the very top of the building. That's reactor 4 over there. The fuel pools were at the top of the building. They're gone. That's decades of reactor cores. Japan was the biggest reactors on the planet, 800 tons. Chernobyl was only 200 tons. The fuel pools are around 6 million pounds in each pool. Because there's no repository anywhere on the planet, the pools would have been stuffed with 4 decades of reactor cores. So you got the media claiming it looks like that when it looks like this. The building don't even exist. The fuel pools would be at the top of them. You got BBC pretending they're at a fuel pool that don't exist. So how are we supposed to have a conversation, an honest conversation, when we won't call out this kind of propaganda? Because all the media in the world done that to you. All the media in the world pretended that that was real when it actually looked like that. So how can we end up with a future if we sit in silence and we don't? At some point, we're going to have to admit the truth. Carbon dioxide emissions from burning natural gas. Carbon emissions don't heat up the planet. Right? Carbon emissions don't heat up the planet. This is radioactive fallout. Pulses energy at the speed of light. Invisible cloud covering the entire planet. Pulsing energy at the speed of light. Do you get it? Because you're only getting one more chance at this on our planet. This is our last kick at the can to save the future from an omnicide by this bizarre industry. See? So what I'm saying, lawmakers from the Netherlands said that classifying natural gas as a green investment would mean the entire climate leadership of the European Union is down the drain. No. Gas doesn't matter. What matters is nuclear. And what matters is what's already happened, acknowledging that. And global warming is nuclear. There's nothing can heat up the planet. The only thing can heat up the planet is the man-made anthropogenic radiation. At some point, the world is going to have to admit the facts. All I'm showing you is the facts. Look, they arrested me and dragged me to court 15 times. They arrested me multiple times and dragged me to court 15 times so they can smear me, so that you wouldn't accept or consider the things I'm showing to you. So that didn't work because I didn't go away. So then they censored me. So I'm censored worldwide. They took down my site 4 months ago with 24,000 subscribers while I was out counting insects and 400 kilometers away from home in the woods. So I had to start up a new site and start posting these presentations in desperation so the planet can have a future. I run myself into the ground for so long that I can't keep up with anything anymore because what I do, the research we do, and the operation, this whole operation is meant to fight for you and your loved ones and the 8 million species. There's nothing easy about waking up every day and walking a mile in my shoes. It's nonstop. It's nonstop. And it's desperate. We're in desperate times because the species now unequivocally are shown to be going extinct. They're not going extinct because of carbon. It's absurd to suggest that carbon is going to make... Right? And so this is the bizarre nuclear industries has a death grip on our planet, and we have to break that death grip. If this was 30 years ago, we'd get weapons and we'd take them out. Now we have to have a conversation, unfortunately. They already locked up the planet. The coronavirus is radiation. They had to come up with a cover story of why everybody was going to get, because they knew everybody worldwide is going to get sick from that radioactive fallout. And there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases, and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries and illnesses. There's heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. There's Alzheimer's and diabetes and Down syndrome and autism and dementia, schizophrenia. There's 1,800 illnesses. But radiation causes heart attacks and stuff like this. And so this is coronavirus. That is coronavirus. And the industry, they're going to lock everybody up in their homes and blame it on. And so there's no way you can have a dissenting opinion. You can't get outdoors in the wild, so you don't notice all the species are missing because you keep everybody locked up. Now they're going to do that every 7 months. They're going to lock down the planet every 7 months and get $500 billion worth of vaccinations so they can make a few dollars. Why they destroy the whole planet. So if you don't appreciate life, soon it'll seem normal to be under dictatorship. We fought all these wars so we would never be in this position, right? It was all for naught. In Europe, it would unlock billions of euros in state aid and taxpayers' money for expensive nuclear degenerate projects. Banks and pension managers. That's the scariest thing imaginable, is your pension managers are going to invest in nuclear. That's absolutely terrifying that they do stuff like that. It's absurd. The whole story is absurd. Trillions of dollars could find its way into nuclear. The political tide has increasingly turned in favor of nuclear as a low-carbon solution. But nuclear is the most carbon-intensive thing in human history. Every facet of it. And it's emitting so much radiation that never stops pulsing energy. It's the opposite of what we're trying to do. There will be a nuclear renaissance, the little lapdog had said. Investment money will start flowing right away on top of it the minute they gave it a thumbs up, which is why they waited a whole year so France would be the presidency of the EU for 6 months. And France has no issues at all with cutting the entire planet's throat at the one time. They're happy to do it, and they demonstrated it many times in their history and their legacies. They refused to give Algeria maps of where they dumped all the nuclear waste, for goodness sakes. If that happens, you said, we're not going to get that genie back in the bottle. Right. And so we are at that pinnacle in history where they're going for broke now. They're trying to exterminate all of us. And if we don't put our foot down now, we never get another chance. And we probably won't even get this chance, but we might if we finally come to our senses. And so I know it's a very long shot. It's 1 in 100 billion. But I got to come out and do these presentations because nobody else on the planet is willing to be honest. Nobody on the planet is willing to come out and do it. And so I'm ran into the ground all day, every day. That's fine. I don't mind that. I wish I could do more, but, it's they're not going to invest $1 billion in me to go beat the nuclear industry up. I can end the nuclear industry for less than $1 million. Climate ripe for nuclear advancements. Again, we see the media come out, cut your throat, go through your pockets and leave you to bleed out on the side of the road on the drop of a hat. Nuclear power also is finding support in the fight against climate change. It's absurd to suggest that nuclear fights climate change. Nuclear is climate change. Nuclear is the disease factory. Nuclear is humanity's worst enemy. The type of fusion energy in small modular reactors at the top of the list, when both fusion and small modular reactors don't exist. In the last 48 months, we brought on 633 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies. By 2026, in 4 more years, we're going to have 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies on Earth. But the year after that, it's going to be around 7,000. The year after that, it's going to be around 10,000 nuclear power plants worth of. But see, 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies is more energy than all the fossil fuel and nuclear currently on the planet. So we'll be able to replace all nuclear currently on the planet in 4 years' time, according to the International Energy Agency. So nuclear knows it's dying, and so now it's going to just cut everybody's throat like a coward, like an incredible coward, an incredible traitor that it is. Does that look carbon-free to anybody? All the precious resources on the planet? Officials have said it's the largest nuclear power construction site in the world, with 12,000 workers on the site each day. And they all got to drive vehicles to get there. More than 1,000 pieces of construction equipment and vehicles. 70 construction cranes. Oh, that's so carbon-free, Dana. Nuclear power is a zero-emission generating source. Really? You really think that covering the entire planet with radioactive fallout, an invisible plume that might never, even if we stop right now, that plume won't disappear? Pulsing energy every second at the speed of light, wrapping the planet, heating the planet up. Why isn't there anybody on this planet with any balls, any guts? Really? Like, why isn't it? How hard is it to be honest? Nuclear power is a zero emission source, and nuclear is not on a zero emission. Of course, since 2015, that narrative of nuclear being zero emission has been jammed down everybody's throat worldwide in the build up to right now. It's all about right now. We are the generation that has to say, wake up this planet and say no, hey, there's another way. Nuclear power is designed to be operated as a base load. Yeah, so is compressed air storage and pumped hydro. You don't need nuclear. The last thing we need on the planet is nuclear, meaning it runs 24/7. Renewables like wind and solar have intermittencies that must be dealt with. And we don't, let me show it to you. I said it enough times, might as well show it, I suppose. This is not rocket science. This technology is obsolete technology. It's easy to do. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. It's the simplest thing to do on top of that. All you got to do is find it. Hang on. There we go. So you got pumped hydro, where you pump water up a hill with excess energy. That's your peak power, right? You have pumped compressed air wind storage. All you're going to do is dig a mine shaft, take your extra air and compress it down in the shaft. Right now they're building a 3,200 megawatt compressed air energy storage in the United States, and that will handle base load for 50 years with no toxic waste. Right? This technology is obsolete. And so there's a model of it, an actual model of it. And here's a model of pumped hydro. This is off-the-shelf technology. You don't got to try to, it's not like fusion where you got to dream up how to make it work and 100 million degrees here, blah, 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 blah. It's not, right? It's technology that's available right at your fingertips. So when you marry that pumped hydro and compressed air storage technologies, you don't have an emittances anymore. It's 100% renewables and what that is your base load power. That's guaranteed 6-hour base load each day. Plus, it's, if you do it right, you got energy for 2 or 3 weeks stored there. Nuclear is demonstrably safest form of energy with one of the lowest death rates. No, as I showed you earlier at the very beginning, these are absurd. These are incredibly absurd. Here we go. By 2012, there was an extra 865,000 cancers in Japan in just the first year. So imagine how many cancers and heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline problems are worldwide after 19 days. Because that model here with my fingers to is after 19 days of radioactive fallout. Building new nuclear reactors is economically viable, especially if it makes it possible to maintain a fleet of around 40 gigawatts in 2050. There was 333 gigawatts came on in renewables this year, for goodness sakes. And they're hoping to get 40 gigawatts by 2050. By 2026 will be 5,500 gigawatts. 5,500 nuclear power plants worth of renewables online. 4,800 gigawatts. So, it's easy to defeat their narrative. Unfortunately, I'm censored, so despite the fact that I'm bringing you incredible documentation, I have 23 people on my show. I have 30 likes. I have 38 votes, and the show has been running for an hour and 22 minutes. And so they're censoring the living daylights out of me in desperation that a single person doesn't have a conversation about the truth. That's not evil. That's insidiously, monstrously, hideously, odiously cowardly. It's one of the most coward things to do on the planet is to censor somebody else. The most hideous thing to do is to censor people like that. Especially when I'd done the research and showed that Fukushima is an extinction level event. Renewable energy saw a record year of growth. About 290 gigawatts of new renewable energy generation capacity, most of it wind and solar, has been installed, beating last year's of 261 gigawatts. And they're hoping to have 40 gigawatts of nuclear by 2050. So they're not being honest. They're not even being sensible. They're not even being realistic. If you took the money that they're planning on dumping in nuclear and put it into energy storage with compressed air and pumped hydro, everybody has a future, a bit of a future. Nobody has a future at this rate, including the species. Avoiding blackouts using 100% clean, renewable energy. Go read it yourself. For some visions of a future powered by clean, renewable energies are clouded by fears of blackouts driven by intermittent electric supplies. And those fears are misplaced, according to a new Stanford University study that analyzes the grid stability, multiple scenarios in which wind, water, and solar energy resources power 100% of U.S. energy needs for all purposes, from Stanford University. According to the researchers, the energy system running on wind, water, and solar, coupled with storage, avoids blackouts, lowers energy requirements, consumers' costs, while also creating millions of jobs, improving people's health, and reducing requirements. Unvaccinated people should not be out in public, and government should enforce it. So there's a few people on YouTube that went out and done random interviews with people on the streets and said, should we lock everybody up who's unvaccinated? And they all, not all, but majority, well, the ones they showed was an absurd amount of people that said, we should lock them up because of the propaganda machine. That you should lose all your freedom, all your civil rights, all your liberties because of a few idiots. At what point are you going to try to have a future, I wonder? Because if you are the ones that determine the future. It's your job, it's your responsibility, it's your obligation. You're obligated under your Bill of Rights, under your Magna Cartas, under your constitutions to stand up and to do the things like I'm doing, right? I'm obligated under Canadian Bill of Rights to push back, to hold the system accountable, to stand tall and not give an inch. And I take my responsibility serious. And there's no fun in this, obviously, but it's easy to tell the truth. There's nothing to it to tell the truth. But in order to do these presentations, you have to accumulate an absurd amount of documentation. You have to have it ready at your fingertips all the time. You have to understand how to use it, and the list keeps going. And so what I do is I do it, this is a educational program in desperation for everybody, including the scumbags that are setting us up for a fall guy. Oh my goodness, eh? France has asked for nuclear power to be included in so-called taxonomy. No. France had the EU delay making the decision until they were running the show, for 6 months. Because the EU, what the EU does is it moves its decision makers every 6 months to a different block, right? So now France is in key position to make those decisions. Polluting companies would be delighted to have the EU seal approval to attract cash and keep wrecking the planet by burning fossil gas and producing radioactive waste, says Greenpeace. And of course, Greenpeace refused to come out and hold them accountable for the fake reactor buildings. Right, I had...
we are here inside Reactor 4 at the...
I had tweeted Greenpeace these videos and pictures over and over and over, asking them to say, hey, they're not really inside the fuel pool of these buildings. They're faking it. And there's an absurd amount that had done it. It was almost all the media worldwide faked, or they took those pictures and put it up on their own site. Greenpeace refused to call them on it. Greenpeace stabbed everybody on the planet in the face over and over and over and over. France has asked for nuclear power to be included, but France shouldn't be asking for anything. These people that want to include nuclear power should be arrested and jailed for the rest of their natural lives. Remember the fear following the 1986 nuclear accident in Chernobyl, Ukraine? You know, the one that closed 9,000 farms in Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom. It changes the sex ratio of all the males and females in the EU. Remember the fear. In Germany, children weren't allowed to play outside anymore for months. Radiation doesn't go away in months, by the way. Farmers had to destroy their entire harvest the year it happened. Again, this is propaganda because you can't grow food there anymore. If I don't know if there's any. I just put an article up at my site last week on Chernobyl, all academic studies, and it'll show you that it's not just for 1 year, it's forever. And on the other hand, nuclear plants release few pollutants into the air. Really? This is one of the models based on 20 days. If you let the model roll for another 10 days, all of this is covered in radioactive fallout too. Right? The truth is so easy to tell. Austria threatens to sue Commission over EU taxonomy rules. Bless their hearts, eh? Austria will take the European Commission to court if it moves ahead with its plan to include nuclear energy. So in a little way, there is some hope out there. Climate Protection Minister said over the weekend. Climate Protection Minister. Well, see, they waited a long time to start telling the truth is one of the big problems. They refuse to tell the truth because the Germany people will go after the nuclear industry in Germany. So they can't even tell the truth now, see? So they'll drag them into court where the average person not paying attention. So why did they leak this on Friday is an interesting question. Because they wanted to get a handle on who was going to push back. And then when the official narrative comes out, there won't be this hype anymore, right? Nuclear energy is a sustainable energy sources, thus paving the way for future investments in nuclear power plants. And calling the move cloak and dagger operation. Nuclear energy is a sustainable energy source where all you got to do is get the permit to build a plant by 2045. It always takes 10 to 15 years to build a plant. These are insane people. Because by 2026, there's going to be 5,500 nuclear power plants where the renewable energies online, which replaces all renewable, which replaces all nuclear and all fossil fuel emitting plants on the planet currently. But by 2 more years after that, it'll be doubled. 2 years after that, if we need it, we can double it again. And of course, renewables are dirt cheap, and so is energy storage if you use compressed air or pumped hydro. And so they lead you away from that well and take you over to the battery technology, which is in its infancy for at least another 100 years. No, they're a disgusting, despicable, hateful, vicious, sadistic industry. If these plans were to be implemented this way, we will sue, she added, stating that nuclear energy is dangerous. But you got to say why it's dangerous. You can't just say it's dangerous. If you want to win that battle, you got to actually give people something tangible. It's dangerous because the fuel pools, the reactor cores that are used, are still splitting the atoms that were producing power for millions of homes each day. That emission is released into the environment each day. So on the first day, there's 1 million in 450 reactor buildings in 1,000 fuel pools each day. There's the energy of 1 million homes times 1,000. So the energy of 1 billion homes is released that day. The next day, there's another billion. So now it's 2 billion. The next day is 3 billion. In 1 year is 365 billion. 365 billion homes worth of nuclear atoms released into the environment, pulsing energy every second. Add that up year after year after year. They're still producing more fuel is going into the pools, more atoms are released into the environment that are, by the way, are surrounded by farms to suck up the radiation. It's an insidious, despicable, coward industry. It's an incredible coward industry. EU Taxonomy Commission sneaks out gas and nuclear plants and locks out citizens. So that was really insidious what they had done. The plan was then leaked to the media. It appears that the Commission will not hold a public consultation on the plan. The second chapter of the EU Taxonomy, despite having done so 3 times for the first chapter, which covers renewable energies, they allowed people to have a comment. But when it comes to nuclear, they closed the doors. Short of digging an actual hole, the European Commission couldn't have tried harder to bury this proposal. And when the question was whether renewables are green, the Commission gave citizens 3 chances to provide their opinion. And for fossil gas and nuclear, we get a document written behind closed doors and published on New Year's Eve. Written behind closed doors and published on New Year's Eve. Irish EU Commissioner. Well, first off, the Irish, it's illegal to have nuclear power in Ireland. So why is she part of this? Gets backing to classified nuclear power as green energy. Bloody witch. Hinting strongly at the outcome, she insisted that strict conditions would be attached to such a classification called Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance in the EU circle. Nuclear power does not emit greenhouse gases, but needs safe disposal and poses radiation risk. Yeah, but what are the risks? Well, they're always emitting radiation. These plumes are always recreated, and they never go away. They last for billions of years, pulsing energy every second. It's insidious. Darlington reactor project sets off alarm bells. Oh yeah, they're going to build a small modular reactor. Instead of getting compressed storage or pumped hydro storage for renewables, they're going to try to develop a small modular reactor, or not small, not modular. The whole story is insane. Austria and Germany lead backlash against the EU greenwashing of the nuclear and gas. And of course, this picture is frightening. These communities and farmland right alongside the nuclear plants. It's hideous. Germany calls nuclear power dangerous, but Germany needs to come out and explain why it's dangerous. You can't just... we're in real trouble, and you need to explain. Nuclear power, universal policy. They got Germany nuclear energy, 3 plants to close. So Germany just closed 3 of its last 6 plants. I read the EU taxonomy, and what they're doing is they're using United Nations numbers for radiation, United Nations narrative, where they claim nobody got hurt by Fukushima, nobody got hurt by Chernobyl, nobody got hurt by 3 Mile Island. And as I already showed you earlier, that's unequivocally not true. And so they're basing the EU taxonomy off this. We'll get to it in a second here. To ensure transparency, the Commission will amend the Taxonomy Disclosure Delegated Act so that investors can identify if activities include gas, nuclear, and to what extent so they can make an informed choice. And they say the EU taxonomy is a robust, science-based transparency, but it's not. The rules and regulations, sustainable use, protection of water and marine sources. Well, Fukushima wrecked our oceans, period. No maybes, no buts, no ifs. So Rule 1's gone. Rule 3 is gone. Protection and restoration of biodiversity in the ecosystem. That's gone because I've done the research expeditions. You can check it out at thenuclearproctologist.org. And pollution prevention and control. You can't prevent it and you can't control it. And it covers the entire planet and it destroys the entire basis of the food chain, the basis of the oxygen chain, the basis of the carbon sequestering chain, which is where trees are. Carbon sequestering is where trees use carbon to grow. And by proxy, right, they make oxygen. Like, the whole way they frame the narrative is disgusting. And guess who done the framing? If you actually go read it, they downplay everything. They won't even talk about Fukushima and the entire thing outside of saying one time that there was no adverse side effects, which is ludicrous. There was 865,000 excess cancers, for goodness sakes. Results are for once through few cycles without processing, recycling plutonium and max fuel. Again, they're claiming, hang on. All of these are propaganda. This is United Nations numbers they're using. The ICRP, unclear, and we've called them out at least 1,000 times over the last decade. And so they say natural exposures is the only emissions on the planet from natural stuff from the solar system. Like it's a lunatic industry. I read the whole bloody thing. I'm not going to do it to you. There's no sense in doing it to you. Because I already covered all the rebuttals throughout the show, right? Well, I covered it extensively. I read through it. I documented it. And they got the arrogance to talk about a return flight from London to Cape Town, consumptions of 100 grams of Brazil nuts, or one CAT scan. These are absurd, unbelievably absurd comparisons. It's an incredible betrayal. It's an unbelievable, hideous, monstrous betrayal. Deteriorating plant threatens mass extinction around the world. It does that by radioactive fallout. And so greenwashing, what they're doing is a crime. Unfortunately, it's been going on for 75 years and it's time to stop it. It's time to make a stand. They found plutonium in every sample throughout Japan, claiming now that there's no adverse side effects. 2,600 cattle contaminated, more vegetables at unsafe levels because of radioactive fallout. There's no centralized system for testing, just voluntary tests. It's absurdness where they didn't even... Products include spinach, mushrooms, bamboo shoots, tea, milk, plums, fish have been found contaminated with just gamma as far as 360 kilometers from Daiichi. We've covered the numbers right across the entire country of Japan. It's absurd numbers. Cow meat with high levels of radiation circulating all over Japan. The cattle had previously only been screened for radioactivity on the skin. And Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they only studied external doses. They didn't study internal doses. For 75 years, They refused to give him medical treatment because he said there was no way that the victims breathed in enough radiation. This shows you that the industry is a kooky, hateful, lunatic industry. It's an absurd, lunatic industry. Fukushima beef being shipped to United States restaurants, that's 2012. They lifted the food ban in Canada on June the 14th, 2011, 90 days after the nuclear meltdown started. It's unbelievable. There's nothing on the planet as evil as what they got done and continue to do. There's nothing on the planet comes close to it. We see radiation from Fukushima in soils in Southern California. High concentrations in the seaweed prevented harvest. Radioactive beef over cesium limits, just gamma, not including beta or alpha neutron ever under any circumstances. As Fukushima beef is shipped to the U.S. resumes this week. That's October 2012, for God's sakes. Do you think that was a one-off? It wasn't, right? Government now ordering complete ban on all shipments of beef from Miyagi Prefecture. Iwate may be next. Widespread concern among radiation spread. Well, I mean, Miyagi was absurd numbers. Like Minnesota. Absurd numbers, and so was Iwate. Even today. The limit of 500 becquerels a kilogram, but they're only talking about cesium. Everybody that allowed that to happen, caused that to happen, should be publicly executed. Even if it's 5 years or 10 or 15 or 20 years down the road. They are 100% guilty of a genocide, an ecocide, and an omnicide. Not maybe, not perhaps, but unequivocally. So the definition of evil actually still doesn't justify how sick is what the nuclear industry had done to everybody on this planet because of Fukushima, let alone everything else. Hawaii dairy farmers fight radiation by feeding boron to cows and goats. You can't decontaminate animals by feeding them boron. The people that done that should be arrested and publicly executed upon conviction. Fukushima will start burning radioactive waste 1 billion pounds at 100,000 becquerels a kilogram. That's dirty bombs. If you burn a pound of that in my community, you're arrested and they'll do documentaries about you and vilify you for the rest of your natural life. And they're talking about in Naraha town, an incredibly radioactive community, burning dirty bombs within the so-called no-go zone. The no-go zone, of course, is our planet Earth. There's a no-go zone because of this insidious, hideous, monstrous, coward, despicable nuclear industry. Workers dumping radioactive waste from Fukushima into the rivers in Naraha. I mean, my goodness, the thing is still melting down today, still hemorrhaging radiation into the environment even as we speak today. All nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. 99% of them are surrounded by farms. Why would you have farms around these disease factories? Because the nuclear industry entire legacy is predicated upon murder and genocide, ecocides, and omnicides. I'm sorry, but I can't sit in silence, and I can't pretend that we can't do nothing, because we certainly can. You can only do nothing if you don't try. Like, Fukushima isn't the only prefecture. They banned food from 14 prefectures in 55 countries, and rightfully so. And they're growing food right by nuclear waste and shipping it. That picture definitely shouldn't exist. There is no checks and balances whatsoever, zero in the nuclear industry. It's just simply a genocide machine. And so generations of genocide machine. Half of Japan, the food was banned in 55 countries. Because it was harmless? Do you think the radiation is going to go away in 10 lousy years? Of course it's not. Evil nuclear power plants surrounded by farms. So this was a fundraiser. I hope people will donate. There's 2 links in the bottom of the description where you can donate. I'll show it to you, just in case you're watching this later. 10 lousy years. Hi, everybody. You got 43 votes. If you scroll down under my description, after you'll have to click it to open this up, you'll see 2 links down there. PayPal to Dana Durnford. That's directly to me. And the nuclearproctologist.org is my site. Let me go back for 1 second. Is my site, and you scroll down a little tiny bit, and you'll see a donate button. All you do is click on that, and you can donate with your credit cards. It's really easy, and if not you, then who? Thank you, James. God bless you, my friend. We're going to end the poll on 43 votes. 95% of people say nuclear power is not carbon free. Thank you, everybody, for having the guts to tell the truth. And we'll let it go, dear. Wow. We made it through in less than 2 hours. Because the last couple of shows, last show was 6 hours. And we got another 10 of these, 12 of them shows that got to go yet. But I got 2 more shows lined up. Well, 3 more, but I haven't got the other one quite ready. I got half the work done. And then we got another full show, like my last 2 shows, which are recaps of 2021. So we got another 10 or 12 recaps of 2021 shows to get through in the next month. And the nuclear news cycle never stops, of course. But this was an emergency show tonight. Incredible emergency. I'd rather have arsenic in rice than radiation, to tell you the truth. Not that I'll eat rice anymore. I can't justify eating rice anymore after what I learned. I can't consider taking the chance, right? And when you look at nuclear power plants, you got to be really careful where you're getting your food from, because they're surrounded by farms. Yeah, thank you, everybody. God bless everybody. Let me give a quick shout out to everybody. We're going to call it a night here. We got a few minutes left. SCH, Richard, McCann, Albert, Timeless Truth, Human, P Answer, James Lucid again, thank you. One more. I usually sneeze in 2s. Quick shout out to everybody. Good night, everybody. Thank you for finding me tonight. I know because it's the holidays, it's been random videos. So I'm trying to get back into the cycle, right? of doing my shows at the regular time. Ted Richards, good night, everybody. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. Yeah, zero emissions or wrongdoing. Thank you, Robert. Anybody forget my apologies? James Ward. Yeah. Colette. Yeah, good night, Colette. Thank you again, honey. Diana Sunshine Wolf. Shared, thank you again. Intentions B, welcome. If I miss anybody, my apologies. Y-Bar. Yes. Port Angeles. Looks like we're almost through the names here. I'll come back to the most recent names in a second. We'll close the show. Jeff Poor. I need another mouse. Looks like I'll be able to go get that. Daryl Murray. Provoke. John Coleman. Hi, John. Yeah, looks like we got through names. I probably missed one or two people. I always seem to anyway. Yeah, good night, everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. I'm assuming I'm going to be here tomorrow night, but I'm exhausted. Because it was so cold in the woods today. Like, it's minus 20 now. It was so cold in the woods today on the bike. At the end of 4 hours, I just barely made it home. It was so cold. It's supposed to warm up over the next couple of days, but my goodness. You know what cold does to your body? When you come indoors, you're exhausted. All you want to do is like sleep, and we can't do that because I had to get the show ready for tonight, right? Chelsea, anybody that I missed, my apologies. I thought we done really good. And so a thumbs up would be appreciated. We're doing pretty good. We got 37, which is better than what I was expecting at the rate things were going. I'm censored so heavy, right? And remember, folks, if everybody donated a small amount, it'll go a long way. We'll see everybody, hopefully tomorrow night. I got 2 shows ready to go. And I'm hoping after I get a night's sleep, because it's 12 o'clock now, I'm hoping after I get a night's sleep, they'll feel better when I wake up tomorrow morning. We'll see. Good night, everybody. Take care. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody soon. Don't forget to share if you have a way of doing it. And just keep the faith, folks. We have the moral high ground. Have a great one. Take care, everybody.